This is DW News live from Berlin. The US vetoes a UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Washington says the measure would jeopardize efforts to broker a hostage deal. Meanwhile, the UN says it is pausing food deliveries to parts of Gaza due to the fighting. Also coming up on the programme, Russia bans Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, labelling the US-funded broadcaster a, quote, undesirable organisation. I'm Manu Coops-McKinnon. To all our viewers around the world and on PBS in the United States, welcome. The US has vetoed an Arab-backed resolution in the UN Security Council demanding a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas, which is labelled a terrorist organisation by many countries. Now, this latest failed attempt to stop the fighting in Gaza comes as the UN's food agency announced a pause in the delivery of life-saving aid to northern Gaza. It says it's due to security concerns. Thousands of children are facing hunger and malnutrition inside the enclave. The UN Children's Agency, UNICEF, has issued a stark new warning about the lack of food, water and health services.
Pushing their bowls and pots, hoping to fill their stomachs and provide for their families. Many of these children survive on one meal a day and have access to less than 1 litre of water per day.
We used to have chicken, rice and many delicious dishes. Now we survive on canned food.
This woman is worried about her 2-year-old, who now weighs half of what she should. After measuring her arm, doctors say she's suffering from acute malnutrition.
Before the war, I was able to get her medication. Now I can't find any of the things I need for her.
UN agencies warn that 10,000 children under 5 years old could be affected by the same condition if not provided with humanitarian assistance.
It has short, medium and long-term implications. The short implications would be that the Gaza Strip is poised to witness an explosion in preventable child death, which would compound the already unbearable level of child death in Gaza, and this is on the short term if nothing changes.
Rates of infection, anemia and stomach diseases have risen sharply. A situation that could get worse in the coming days.
DW Washington Bureau Chief Innes Paul explained why the US vetoed the Arab-backed resolution that was demanding a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas.
Washington said that the Algerian proposed resolution would jeopardize talks to end the war, arguing that it was not the right time to call for an immediate ceasefire while negotiations between Hamas and Israel were continuing. Anya, I think it's worth to mention here that 13 countries on the 15-member body backed Algeria's resolution, while the UK abstained and the US vetoed it.
OK, so help us understand the main differences then between the Algerian proposal, which was vetoed, and Washington's own proposal.
Right, so the difference lies in the requirements that need to be fulfilled. The draft resolution proposed by the US calls for a temporary ceasefire as soon as practicable and on the condition that all hostages are released. However, it is unclear if or when the Security Council will vote on the form of words proposed by Washington.
OK, and this is the first time that the US has used this word ceasefire, isn't it? What does this say about its current relations with Israel?
Right, so this really marks a moment. The Biden administration has not only come under immense international pressure to use its leverage to rein in Israel's devastating operations, but Biden is also facing intense pressure from members of his own party to speak more forcefully on the situation in Gaza. And of course, in this election year, which is just beginning, Biden is also risking to lose important voter bodies like young voters or Arab Americans because of his support for Israel.
Ines, thanks so much for that update. That's DW's Washington Bureau Chief, Ines Paul. Now, authorities in Russia have opened a new criminal case against the brother of the late Russian opposition leader, Alexei Navalny. Oleg Navalny, seen here in file footage with his brother, was already on the wanted list for another matter. In 2014, Oleg Navalny was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison for fraud in a case that Kremlin critics said was trumped up. Now, police say they have opened a new case but have not yet unveiled details of the charges. Now, this comes after the mother of Alexei and Oleg Navalny made a direct appeal to Vladimir Putin for Alexei's body to be released. His death was announced by Russian authorities last Friday.
Behind me is the prison colony where my son Alexei Navalny died on February 16th. For 5 days, I have not been able to see him. They have not released his body to me and have not even told me where it is. I appeal to you, Vladimir Putin, because the resolution of this problem depends solely on you. Let me finally see my son. I demand that Alexei's body be released immediately so that I can bury him properly.
We asked DW Russia analyst Constantine Egot what he makes of the new criminal case that's been opened against Alexei Navalny's brother, Oleg.
Well, it is the element of this continuous pressure. It shows that the family will not be left alone. Luckily, Oleg Navalny, according to the Russian media reports, is living outside of Russia. I think it's Cyprus, but I think we should verify it. I think it's Cyprus. And probably he's not going to be arrested. But if you look at the way, for example, Putin's regime tried to use at least the Interpol lists, he may well be pursued across the globe. So this is an additional pressure element, and this is an additional way of saying we're not going to leave you alone.
DW Russia analyst Constantine Egot there. Now, Russia has banned the US-funded broadcaster Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, designating it as, quote, an undesirable organization. The move puts Radio Free Europe staff and contributors at increased risk of prosecution. One of its editors, Alsu Komasheva, is already being held in prison in Russia, pending trial for allegedly spreading false information. Now, Radio Free Europe is the latest broadcaster to receive this designation. The Kremlin has increasingly been using it to crack down on dissent ever since its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Now, this broadcaster, DW, was also banned in early 2022 from reporting from Russia and was shortly later classified as a so-called foreign agent. Let's get more now from Yuri Resheto. He was the head of DW's Moscow bureau before it was closed down by authorities. He reports now from Riga. Yuri, can you tell us more about what this ban means for Radio Free Europe, for its journalists and contributors?
Oh, the status of an undesirable organization, Anya, is a pretty bad status, much more dangerous than the status of a so-called foreign agent. Cooperation with a foreign agent is not punished, at least in theory. Of course, many people are afraid to work with the so-called foreign agents, but in purely legal terms, this has no consequences. This status simply means that a person or organization is financed from abroad and carries out so-called political work. The fact that this is interpreted differently, the practice, is something else. It's a completely different matter if you work with the undesirable organization. This can have serious legal consequences. First, a warning is issued, then the person working with or supporting, which much worse. The so-called undesirable organization is threatened with criminal charges. The penalty can be a fine of the equivalent of 3,000 euros or, in the worst case, up to 4 years in prison. There are now more than 40 undesirable organizations in Russia, and there are also media outlets such as the independent investigative news portal Meduza and the TV station Rain or Dozhd in Russian. Both are not based in Russia but report from exile here in Latvia and the Netherlands, and of course their employees are taking an enormous risk.
Yuri, tell us a bit about what happened to you and DW's Moscow staff back in 2022.
Well, back in 2022, exactly 2 years ago, Anya, we as Deutsche Welle were classified as a so-called foreign agent in Russia. You said it because, according to the Russian authorities, we are a foreign-founded organization that is allegedly politically active. These are formal criteria for this classification. In theory, of course, that's not the case. We are not politicians, we are journalists. But the interpretation of the law is to who is foreign agent in Russia and who is not is now so broad. The law is so vaguely worded that just about anyone who receives even €1 from a foreigner, posts something on their account on social networks, for example, could be classified as a foreign agent. This list is now very long in Russia, and we as W are also on it. Before we got this status, we were banned in Russia. First, our Moscow office was closed after 20 years. Our accreditation was withdrawn, and at the same time, our TV channels and our website were blocked. But we haven't been silenced. We have continued to report on Russia, meanwhile, for 2 years, now just in exile, here in Riga, in the Latvian capital.
DW's Yuri Risheta reporting from Riga. Yuri, thank you so much. OK, let's take a look now at some of the other stories making headlines. And a Russian court has ruled that the American journalist Evan Gershkovich must stay in custody until at least the end of March. The Moscow City Court rejected an appeal against Gershkovich's detention, saying he will remain behind bars until his trial on espionage charges. The Wall Street Journal reporter denies the charges against him. A Russian pilot who defected to Ukraine with his helicopter last year has been found dead in Spain. Authorities say his body was found riddled with bullets in an underground parking garage near Alicante in southern Spain. The pilot had been living in Spain under a fake identity. Rights groups are accusing Ethiopia's government of cracking down on dissent. Now, this after authorities extended the state of emergency in the Amhara region earlier this month and carried out mass arrests. There are concerns that a new wave of hostilities could worsen the humanitarian situation in Ethiopia's north. The current unrest in Amhara and the aftermath of a war in neighbouring Tigray have accelerated food shortages. The government recently admitted that hundreds of people have died in recent months due to starvation. The UN estimates that 20 million people are in need of food assistance. DW's Marielle Müller looks at the situation outside the Tigray region's capital, Mekelle.
It took hours for Letizgiher Gabra to carry her 2-year-old son to Yechila, the town with the nearest hospital. Just in time, it seems.
When my son got seriously ill, I brought him here. They gave him a nutritional supplement called Plumpy-Nut. I'm feeding him with that.
Slowly, little Haftun Gusu is getting better. Letizgiher and her husband are farmers, like many in the region, but the ongoing drought has killed off all their crops and animals.
We are starving. I have been begging for food in nearby towns since October. My son is starving. I haven't received any help.
Back in her village, there are many people in a similar state, she tells us, but they're too weak to make the journey. Those who do reach the hospital are already in a very bad condition, Nurse Josef Gebremichael says. In the past 3 months, malnutrition cases have tripled.
We have taken care of more than 120 children who came to our hospital. Even they aren't getting enough support. We cannot accept any more because we don't have the resources to help them. They suffer at home on their own.
He's worried about the long-term consequences.
Malnutrition causes persistent problems for the next generation. Those malnourished children will be affected physically, mentally, and their general development overall.
The town of Yechila has witnessed one of the war's fiercest battles. Bombed-out trucks can still be seen along the roads. Following the 2-year war that ended in 2022, came months of drought. In March 2023, the United Nations and the United States halted food aid for the Tigray region and later to the whole country because of a widespread scheme by Ethiopian officials to steal humanitarian grain. After reforms were put in place, aid agencies resumed deliveries 2 months ago. But of the over 3 million people targeted, only 14% have so far received any food. 25 kilometers outside the town of Yechila, farmers Mbaye Gebreselassie and his wife are desperate to find anything to eat for the next day.
We need aid from the government and donors. If not, we face death. No one will survive. We need attention. We are human too.
Across Ethiopia, 1 in 6 of the 120 million population need food aid because of drought, conflict and rising inflation. Mbaye, who hasn't had a proper meal in weeks, hopes it won't arrive too late.
The WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange, has failed to appear in a UK court in what could be his last chance to stop his extradition to the US. Lawyers for the 52-year-old say he is too unwell. His legal team is trying to persuade judges there to grant a new appeal hearing. Assange is wanted by US prosecutors who intend to put him on trial on spying charges. His wife says he could die if he is extradited.
Outside the High Court in London, a heartfelt message from Assange's wife to supporters gathered to press for his release.
We don't know what to expect. But you're here because the world is watching.
The 2-day hearing could become Assange's final battle in the UK justice system, but his lawyers say he was too unwell to attend. The 52-year-old has been fighting for more than a decade to avoid being sent to the US, where he could face life in prison if convicted on spying charges. Assange has been a wanted man since 2010, after his whistleblowing forum WikiLeaks published classified US Army material supplied by an intelligence analyst. The leak contained documents and video footage from the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Some of the footage was shocking, seemingly implicating US troops in possible war crimes. If Assange's appeal fails, his backers fear his life could be at stake.
If Julian's extradited to the United States, he will die. He will not receive a fair trial.
Many of his supporters believe he's being targeted for exposing serious criminal acts by US authorities and the military.
Julian Assange is a truth teller. He is not a criminal. He shouldn't have even spent 1 second in any prison.
Campaigners pressing for his release warn this case could signal a larger threat.
He would be the first publisher tried under the Espionage Act in this way, and that is why it is so dangerous. We've seen that law being used against whistleblowers, but never before against a publisher like this. So what is at stake is really concerning.
While it's not known when the verdict will come, many already fear the possible effects on the free flow of information worldwide. If all else fails, intervention by the European Court of Human Rights may be Assange's final hope.
DW correspondent Birgit Maas is at London's High Court, where the hearing is taking place. She told my colleague Sarah Kelly more about the appeal by Assange.
Today, Sarah, is the day where Julian Assange's team are setting out their case, and their main argument has been this morning that it's a political case, and as such, he is covered by freedom of speech and he should not be extradited. Now, it's interesting, I've just been able to speak to Julian Assange's brother, Gabriel Shipton, and he said to me that the family or his inner circle are hoping that there will be a political solutions, that behind the scenes that governments are working together and that there is a process behind the scenes, and that's what he's hoping will bring justice for his brother. That's what he said to me. He also said that they are quite concerned about his brother's health. He wasn't physically able to attend the court hearing today, and that's something that continues to worry the family, of course.
DW's Birgit Maas in London. Now, he is considered Hollywood royalty with a body of work spanning decades and over 40 feature films. And so it seems only fitting that Martin Scorsese should be handed an honorary Golden Bear Award for his lifetime achievement at this year's Berlin Film Festival, the Berlinale. And DW Culture reporter David Levitz joins us now live from the Berlinale red carpet. David, what's happening there this evening? Who have you seen? What have you heard?
Well, Anya, Martin Scorsese is expected to be appearing here on the red carpet any second. Sharon Stone just appeared, an actress, one of his few leading ladies, in a huge black cape. She got plenty of applause, so I think we're going to be hearing more cheers any second now from Martin Scorsese, the man of the hour.
Absolutely. I mean, he's been awarded this honorary Lifetime Achievement Award, hasn't he? He's known for producing films that contain extreme violence, profanity, that blur the lines between good and evil. I mean, there are some pretty dark themes there, and yet people just keep flocking to his films, don't they?
That's right. You know, I think what's riveting about Scorsese's films is that there actually aren't really any good guys, at least not in the lead roles. And he really does focus on the dark sides of humanity, particularly of men, let's be honest. And that goes back actually to his own biography, his childhood growing up in New York City's Little Italy, brushing shoulders with members of the mob as a child and a young man. And he really wanted to know and explore how people could function within that kind of world. And he's really leaned into that, if you will. That's also, by the way, the reason that some people, not many, but some people don't like his films. And going back to the 1970s, there have been people, even going back to Taxi Driver, who have said that his films are more of a celebration of the brutality, of the killing, of the bad language that we see so much of in his films. There are people, especially with The Wolf of Wall Street, who said that it was too much of a celebration of greed and excess. Even in his latest film, Leo, Leonardo DiCaprio in Killers of the Flower Moon, it's not really clear if there's anything redeeming about him or if he's just a plain sociopath. And there are some people who say that Scorsese needs to take more of a moral line, that he needs to distance himself or somehow give us a clear signal that he's condemning his characters. Scorsese, for his part, says that he's not going to do that he would find that, frankly, boring.
Mm-hmm. He's known as well, isn't he, for standing up to the studios, for standing up for what he thinks is right. Tell us more about that.
Right, Scorsese sees cinema as an art, he sees himself as an artist, and he doesn't like it when the studios get in the way of his art. Take, for example, The Departed, the movie that won the Oscar. Warner Brothers wanted to change the ending. They didn't want Scorsese to kill off his main character because they wanted to leave room for a sequel and making more money. Well, Scorsese didn't have it, he got his way, and he got the Oscar. He also had plenty of fights with Harvey Weinstein on the two films that Weinstein produced of his over the budget. And in general, Scorsese is very critical of the studio system trying to make more money, particularly with more franchises, more sequels. The Marvel Comics series films, he said, are not art, and he's stood by that.
David, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks so much. That's DW Culture reporter David Levitz reporting live from the Berlinale. And with that, you are up to date. I'll be back after a short break to take you through the day. And don't forget, you can always get more news on our website at dw.com. I'm Anya Coopers-McKinnon. Thanks for watching, and I hope you can join us for the day in just a moment.